Chris, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I wanted to talk about an article that I read recently by Addison Rizer, How Reading Ebooks Changes Our Perception and Reviews. And I thought it would be a good exercise to look closely at that article and to explore why it is that people tend to have better retention and enjoy physical books over a Kindle device. And I think the Supernote A5X and the Max Lumi both offer a number of tools to maximize productivity, to mitigate against some of the dangers in just picking up any old Kindle device and reading. And I wanted to share some of those ideas with you today, so I hope you find this video useful. So let's turn to the article, How Reading Ebooks Changes Our Perception and Reviews. This is written by Addison Rizer, and I think it helpfully summarizes some of the issues involved. And initially, the previous 90s studies are noted, together with a study on kids' enjoyment. They don't enjoy reading ebooks as much. Paid less attention with an ebook, and then this crucially, a Norwegian study of 10th graders revealed that those who read paperbacks scored higher on post-reading questionnaires, so retention seems to be superior when you've got a physical book. Now, I'm stuck with e-screens because I need to save space. So how might we learn how to better use ebooks so that we can retain what we're reading better, facilitate critical reflection, and so on? Well, let's then look at this article, because it talks about why it is that reading ebooks changes our engagement with a text. Maybe we'll have a few things to learn, and I think we do in such a way that the Supernote A5X and the Max Lumi can really bring something to the table here to help us engage with the text more constructively. So they begin by looking at navigation and understanding. Here we have superior retention noted when engaging a physical book, could even transport you and immerse you into a novel better. And I think this is a crucial claim here, that humans use different parts of the brain when reading from a piece of paper or from a screen. And people read more slowly on a screen by as much as 20 to 30%. This we're going to have to come back to a little bit later on. But still, we're not really, why is this the case? Well, finally, Addison Rizer turns to the physicality of books, which I find particularly helpful. I'll put a link in the video description, by the way, to this article. But readers in these surveys who all suggested that they weren't getting as much out of an ebook as they were from a physical book, and anecdotally I find the same. I prefer a physical book usually, and I find my retention as well between reading on a Kindle in particular, even the Kindle Oasis and a physical book, there's a marked difference, I think. But readers in these surveys say it's harder to flip back to sections or lines on a device rather than with a print book. This complaint of lacking tactile aspects appear in other studies too. The implicit feel of where you are in a book turns out to be more important. And so this famous old book, Karl Barth's The Epistle to the Romans, I simply need to open the first few pages, and there I have the table of contents. I can flick through the text here and notice where I've made some highlights. All of this seems to me intuitively obvious. I can go back to the index, not as straightforward on a Kindle. Oh, I think I've skipped a page here. Either way, these are the issues that are picked up by those who were subjects in these tests. You can't flip back to find a section, that you're having trouble with a timeline. And of course the same would be with a Fachbuch, a subject text, a subject book. And this section then says it's the same when looking at art. And crucially, movies will be reviewed differently depending on whether they were streamed into your device and you watched it at home, or whether it was part of a social event, watching together. And so they also speak of the social experience of viewing a film. Films were rated more negatively when they were just watched in a bedroom. As Theron, the actress, pointed out, there's something magical that happens when you're in a room full of strangers. You can't recreate this artificially. And this all played out in how a film was reviewed. Usability and accessibility. The final section talks a little bit more here, not final, about the advantages of ebooks. If you've got dyslexia, apparently there's some study that you can perform better with an iPad. And of course, if you're reading a text in a different language, you can very quickly look up definitions or translations. And adding an audience is brought out here, particularly Goodreads. And I want to come back to that a little bit later on. But just a couple of final points here. With Goodreads, adds an audience to what's often a personal and intimate experience, the act of reading and processing books. In other words, it isn't enough just to be you with the text. There needs to be some other context in order to facilitate the learning process. I'm going to come back to this. Down the bottom here, a numbers game, which I believe is the final section. Perhaps without your dark cube, the interruptions created by the simple existence of the numbers, namely in Kindle, progress, the statistics associated with speed of reading, or the number of times a word is used and so on, can be distracting. And that means that whether they realize it or not, many people approach computers and tablets with a state of mind less conducive to learning. So we've been diagnosing in this article why it is that ebooks seem to be a problem when it comes to retention, critical reflection, ease and use and navigation, and even pleasure in reading. Now I want to turn to the Supernote in order to see what we might learn from this and to develop some strategies. So here we have the Supernote, and as I open this up, I'm reading this book here on the Supernote, and I want to offer some suggestions for what we might learn from Addison Rizer's essay, which I found really quite helpful. The first, and I'm going to flip between my notes and this text just to really showcase the way this is very, very flexible. So, how to read ebooks in view of Rizer's article. The first is to get a feel for the book as a whole and to tag sections. So if you remember, very important in the article was the way in which navigation across a text, knowing where you were, the intuitive feel of where you were in a text, your ability to go back to difficult sections, to have an overview, all of those things are more difficult on a Kindle. Now, this is how I am trying to develop some strategies to mitigate against that. So very often PDFs will have a table of contents. This one turns out doesn't. So I'm making my own, simply. So I know I've got the contents here. I simply wrote out the word contents, lassoed it, recognized it, and there it is. Now this is a very famous book with lots of different prefaces, and they're all gold for a theologian like me anyway. So I've tagged them all, so I can go to the second preface, or I can go to the sixth preface just with one click. Chapter 1, and there I am straight away in the text. It helps me to navigate the text as a whole, to have some idea of where I am, and here is where page numbers will be useful as well. So back to 0, the first page here. Now I didn't actually tag the author's preface as far as I remember, but click on contents, takes me right to the overview here. And as I work through the book, I will be putting in subsections certainly chapter headings, and this will give me all I need to navigate the text more coherently. So there's the first tip, namely let me just go back to the note, to get a feel for the book as a whole by tagging sections, and to practice navigating across a book within Supernote or within the Max Lumi or whatever it is that you're using, by making use of the page numbers, navigation process, and so on. So that's the first tip. So here's an example of how I might tag a subsection. This is within chapter 1. So here I would write 01 personal matters, then lasso around this to recognize, and there we have it, 01 confirm. And when we go back to the table of contents, you can see there it's added nicely, and 01 indicates to me that it's within chapter 1, but also it's in lowercase to help me distinguish it from major chapter headings. Right, now to the second tip, namely to write out annotations. This was borne out in the article to a certain extent, but anecdotally I find this very much to be the case. That when I am reading and engaging a text on the Kindle device, where I'm typing in my annotations, having highlighted a part of the text with my finger and dragged it across, and then used the little keyboard at the bottom in order to type something in, I find that I don't engage with the text in the same robust way than when I am writing on it, where I'm putting in big question marks. Oh, let's choose the pen. Big question mark and exclamation mark. There's something far more tactile, which was a word that came up in the article, when having pen on paper, as it were. So my second tip is to make sure that you're using annotation. And this, I think, is great when you've got a Max Lumi, you've got a Supernote A5X, or whatever else it is, where you can scribble on the thing itself. The third tip is to minimize page reformatting, and particularly in the Supernote A5X, I think this is a good option. The Max Lumi, you can reflow PDFs drastically. And when it comes to EPUB text, you can really reflow them also in the Supernote A5X. But that might not be the best idea, because then you lose your sense of where you had your annotations in a text, or where an argument was on a page. I often find that when I'm trying to remember where something was in a book, I remember where it was on the page, even if I can't remember what page number. And so keeping a standard trim on PDFs here, I think, is crucial, and where possible using the suggested format for EPUB books. In fact, maybe I can quickly go to an EPUB book in order to demonstrate that. Logic and critical thinking. And what you will see here is display settings, and it's document default setting. I would suggest sticking with that unless you really need to. And because when you start getting into user defined, not only is the program, needs a little bit of work before it's superior in that regard, but here you are also very clearly given a page format that you can come back to. You can remember where things were on a page. In other words, facilitates the more tactile feel of a physical book, which is what I'm suggesting will be useful for us. Now let me just go back here. Now the recent button can take a while to register. There we are. Bart's Epistle to the Roman, Bart on Paul's Epistle to the Romans. And now let's go back to the note for the next tip. So minimize page reformatting. But now, this was brought up by focusing on Goodread, not Goodreader, but Goodread, where there's an audience for your reading. And I would recommend reading a book in a book club. So I'm going through The Church Dogmatics by Karl Barth, which is a multi-volume text with a group of friends. But with Goodread, you can also share what you're reading, of course, very organically, and that works quite well on Kindle. But here, with a text like this, it's a little bit more difficult, frankly, unless you use Screenshot, which you can then annotate and add on Twitter. If that's your thing, that might be useful. At least according to the article, that's another tool that we can deploy in order to maximize the benefit of using ebooks. Five is to change locations. If I'm listening to an audiobook and I'm walking around the block, I tend to remember what was going on in the story and associate that rather with where I am physically. I can remember a part of the story was associated with the end of my road, for example. Then when I turned around the corner and went up the road, and then I remember, I was in that part of the story. And it might be worthwhile then changing locations when reading particular texts. Obviously at the moment, pandemic, we can't, but going to different coffee shops perhaps with different books, just to help facilitate the holistic engagement with a text as far as we can. Six, use the A5X or other non-distraction options. Now this was in the article under numbers game. In fact, I'm going to go back and find that now. Alright, so just back to the article again. It says here, perhaps without your dark cube, the interruptions created by the simple existence of these numbers changes your perception. And remember, the perception and the differences created by reading an ebook were kind of detrimental when it came to all of the good stuff, like retention and creative thinking and so on. So we need to cut down on interruptions. And so in that regard, particularly the A5X, I think, is suited here. The thing with the Max Lumi is unfortunately I've installed Chess Program on there, my email account, a web browser, and so on. This is designed to be distraction free, to facilitate getting information on our terms. So I think this is a really good device for cutting out some of those distractions. It's effectively you with a book again, and if you can navigate it in a certain way, then all strength. Now, finally then, this has been shown to be better for dyslexia, and I think as well the Max Lumi will be fantastic in this regard. But when it comes to speed reading, I covered previously the Kindle option of Word Runner, which doesn't work in this. I covered that in the previous video. I'll be showing you in a later video that it works a little bit better with the Max Lumi, so you can use that kind of option. Or Spreeder is another one associated with my PC web browser, and Sprint Reader, sorry, as well. And I think then the dangers involved with reading an ebook, they're all dealt with, because I find I can then read faster with an ebook. So I think these are 7 strategies, well 6 with just a note about dyslexia, for improving retention, for aiding critical reflection with annotation, for enabling navigation and ease of use and thereby saving time, and I think as well making for a more pleasurable read. And I finish by underscoring this. reading can be genuinely a pleasure on a screen like this, whether you're taking it outside, whether you're in a heavily lit area. It's far better than reading on a shiny screen, I find, because it seems to work with the device and with your eye in a way that wouldn't otherwise be the case. So here are my tips for engaging with an e-reader, engaging with ebooks, and maximizing the benefits. I hope you found this video useful. To sum up, I find the Supernote really does strike a good balance. I can write on PDF pages. There's a very tactile feel then. There isn't a great adjustment with reflow as there is with a Kindle device, so you know where a word was on a page. And of course the Kindle devices, you have to type in your annotations, and I never find that as satisfying as engaging with a book on a device like this. I recommend that you look at Morning Coach, CPO, Voya to help you decide which device might be best. Perhaps it's the Note Air, the Max Lumi, the Remarkable 1 or 2. I find this one to be a good device because it cuts down distraction in a way that the Books devices might not be ideal for, but it also offers a little bit more functionality than the Remarkables 1 and 2. Hence, I've been making reference to this one in this video. Either way, I'd be interested to hear your comments. What other piece of advice would you give when it comes to maximizing and benefiting from ebooks, given the issues raised in that article? And I'll look forward to interacting with you there.